girls, and welcome to Season 3 of the Hey Girl podcast with my mom, Bethany Needham. Each week, guests will share their amazing stories of following Jesus on all kinds of journeys. I hope their stories inspire you to run your race in your place. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey listeners, and welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Hey Girl podcast. I know you have a bazillion other options of things to listen to, and it is truly humbling to me that you would take this time out of your day to listen to the podcast, to hear these stories. And I know that today's episode will not disappoint. Let me tell you that this was a first for me. The first time I have ever interviewed a married couple at the same time. And what better way to kick off a married couple interview than one of my favorite couples of all time? Have you ever met somebody in your life and you just knew that one, your life would never be the same, and two, that you wanted them to be in your life from that moment forward? Well, John and Jane Ray are absolutely those people, and I had the privilege of serving alongside of them at different times in Mexico with my students, and our paths have crossed in other places as well, but we'll get into that in the interview. Here's what I want you to know. I have never ugly cried in an interview quite as much as I did in this one. And so I like to give you fair warning that you probably want to grab a box of tissues. They have a powerful story and they tell their story with such grace. And I just know there's going to be so many things you're going to pull out of it. In fact, unless you're driving, I would recommend maybe grab your journal because there's just gold in this episode. Things I took notes on and I'm so excited to talk with you and share after the episode. So sit back, grab your tissues, your journal and your pen, and maybe a nice hot cup of coffee, and meet my friends, John and Jane Ray. John and Jane, we met in kind of an interesting way because you actually live in Arkansas. I live just outside of Boston, but we actually met in Mexico.
That's right.
So you all were involved, and I'll let you talk about it, but building homes there in Mexico. And I was bringing my youth ministry out, and we had a part in the YWAM ministry there in Ensenada, Mexico. And you were the speaker, I believe, for our mission adventure. And let's just be real. We fell in love with your family immediately and kind of started stalking you at that point. Like, would book our weeks based on, so when will the Rays be there? It got so bad at one point, I'm pretty sure we made you fly to us. We're like, you know what? We just need more of you. So get on a plane. We're bringing you to Boston. And you were so gracious to come. So I know you guys have a really powerful story. That was one of the things that you shared the first time I met you, kind of in front of our students. And then you got the opportunity to share a little more of that with our church family. But I would love for our listeners to kind of hear a little bit about you. So why don't we start? I'm going to go the opposite of what you think. We're going to Jane. So Jane.
That is the opposite of what I was thinking.
Catch you off guard. So you know what? I don't remember the story. Is how did you actually meet John? And how did Jane and John become, Jane and John?
Well, I am that rare individual who will tell you that God told me I was going to marry John Ray. And that's the absolute truth. I had already been a missionary for a few years, saw his picture up on a board, and I remember thinking, who is that? But not in a really good way. There he was in hunting fatigues and holding a dove, and I was just thinking, oh, that one's interesting, right? Time goes on a little bit. He finishes his training. He goes on staff. I've already been on staff. And I did that thing. And I said, God, what do you want me to do? And I just laid it out before him. And I said, God, if there's a relationship anywhere for me, I really want the one that you want for me. And it's the only time in my life I thought I heard an audible voice. And God said, you're going to marry John Ray. Thing is, I kind of didn't even really know him. I'd had a few conversations. I saw a photo that I thought was unflattering.
Well, you are a photographer, so in his defense, you're going to be pretty critical.
Oh, right. And so I'm going to cut it short, but what I did is I threw out a fleece. I've never done that before. I've never done it before. I've never done it since. And I said, God, and I threw out this like unbelievably impossible thing to happen, and it did. And so we started to get to know each other, but I knew one thing, that God had spoken to me. But John needed to get his own. He needed to have his own confirmation. He needed to hear God on his own, and he wasn't going to use mine. And it wasn't until the night he asked me to marry him, when I told him what God had said to me, that I'd had this confirmation, and I knew in my heart that that's who I'd heard. But I also know along the way that sometimes you have to hold things with these lovely open hands. And that we can turn right when God tells us to turn left. And every once in a while, John would say, are you sure about this? And I'd say, yep, I'm sure. But I also knew that God would talk to him, just like he spoke to me. And apparently he did, because we've been married for, how long have we been married for?
28 years.
28 years.
Wow. You know,
that's how we met.
So I want to know if that unbelievably impossible fleece is appropriate to share or not, because now I want to know, what did God do?
Well, the reason why it's because it's kind of stupid. Like, it's not this brilliant thing. Okay, I had 4 roommates and I was surrounded by 100 people, and I said, God, I said, this is you. Will you have John be the only person left to take me to the airport at Christmas? Now, again, I had 105 people standing in front of the man that I really hardly even knew. And when it came down to it, my roommates were gone. The day was set. The flight had to leave, and John was my guy. So
literally,
I know,
he
and
was
I
your
tried.
Guy.
He's my guy. There you go. And he's still my guy, and he still takes me to the airport. So,
John, now, you know I want to hear your side of this.
Jane makes this sound real passive.
What?
But you got to know, she asked me out first.
Oh.
On our first date. Is that she asked me. And so we have a cross-cultural marriage. You need to know that. I'm from Texas. She's from Pennsylvania. So huge cultural gap there.
It's really true, actually.
With that. I mean, it took us a whole year of marriage to realize we were using the same vocabulary and 2 very different dictionaries when it came to things.
You should write a marriage book on that point alone.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And we still sometimes have to stop and say, now, what do you mean by that word that you're using there?
I do not think you know what that word means.
I think you know the meaning of that word.
This word you keep using. I do not think it means what you think it means.
What do you think it means? So she wrote me this note, and every year her grandmother would send her money to go out on her birthday. And so as Jane tells the story, she sent up a quick prayer. God, would you let me take John? Okay, thank you. And she writes me this note saying, basically telling the story. Grandma sends me, money every year. Just wondering if you wanted to go out to eat. No pressure. Which she meant, logically, like there's no pressure to say yes.
Exactly.
I took it as, hey, do you want to go out to eat? No pressure, buddy. Like, you better keep your hands to yourself.
Going back to the different dictionary thing, or...
And so I'm thinking, well, okay, I don't know whether I'm supposed to be flattered or offended here with this offer with that. But anyway, we went out to eat. We went and saw a local Shakespeare play at the university. We saw Macbeth. And
so cheery.
So romantic.
Yeah.
And I'm deaf in my left ear, which she didn't know at the time, which means that if I'm in the passenger seat and Jane was driving, I have to turn and look at the person to hear them.
And lean. It's a leaning thing.
No pressure, dude.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to listen, but not trying to get too close. Like I'm putting pressure. But she thought that I was being super attentive, which she found very attractive. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
Oh, that leaning. Oh, that really sold me. It was very good.
Look at that. God took your deaf left ear.
That's right.
And I mean, talk about getting beauty out of that.
It also helps me take naps, which is really nice. I just put my good ear down and then it's quiet. So
that's true. There's a lot of positives in that.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm going to defend Jane on this one, that if she asked you out after the fleece, she already had her green light. So at that point, why wait? God had said he's the one. So you go, Jane.
I know that this is a podcast, but I have my thumb up in the air. Thumb up. Yes. Click that button.
Well, and it was, I mean, there's obviously a lot more to the story, because real soon after that, Jane was going home for an extended time back to Pennsylvania. And before she would come back to Arkansas, I was going to be helping lead an outreach down to Central America. Mm-hmm. So we were going to be apart for 4 months after this. And this is, I mean, we're old. This is pre-internet, pre-texting, pre-all of that. She wrote a letter or made an envelope for every single day that I was gone and gave it to me before I left. And so there were however many little, and so there were, some days it was just a day off the calendar with a picture. Some days it was a note. Some days it was a photograph. But she made something for every day that I was gone to open on each day. And I had taken a box and just put a bunch of things that I liked in it for her to kind of have, like an old T-shirt and a mixtape, again, because we're old, right? It wasn't a playlist. It was an actual physical mixtape, a couple books with that to leave with her while I was gone.
Okay, I have to pause you, because going back to the different dictionary, see, in your dictionary, you just described a romantic gesture. In my dictionary, you just described a breakup box.
That's true.
If I had been handed the box of like, wait, what is he saying? And then you're gone to Central America. I don't have any. Do you want me to burn it? Is this over? What is happening?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm going to need the John Ray dictionary before we complete this.
Well, she interpreted it correctly. That one, she interpreted what it was meant to be.
Maybe that was pre-breakup boxes, too. Maybe that might have come later. So.
I'm not familiar with those. So, yeah, I was definitely not.
How have you not watched Gilmore Girls? John, come on.
All of them.
They always have their boxes in the back of the closet with the different ex-boyfriends, you know.
Wow, as often as that has been played
That's true.
in this house, I missed that episode.
Don't worry. I got you, John. Oh, well, first of all, that's adorable and romantic, all wrapped up into one. And so tell me, after that, 4 months apart, how long before the vows were said? How long after that did you guys get married?
About 6 months at the most. And we actually we actually set our wedding date after leading an outreach to Mexico with a bunch of high schoolers, because we wanted to do that so much. So we made sure that our wedding was after going to Mexico with 60 or more high school students. I don't know. It seemed like the obvious thing to do at the time. Sure, we're going to Mexico first, and then.
Well, and that was a huge part of the confirmation that we were supposed to get married for me, because, like Jane said, she had this encounter with God that He spoke clearly, and I didn't have anything like that. I actually had an encounter vicariously with a 5-foot Peruvian evangelist who got in a friend of mine who we were roommates at the time, and he was dating his now wife. Jaime Useche, who's this evangelist, literally a 5-foot tall guy from the Amazon, gets up in my friend's face and says, "You find out what her vision is. You don't date anybody if she doesn't have the same vision." And I had shown up in missionary training. Listen, it was a big switch of lifestyles, let's just say, for me when I got into ministry. It was, anybody who had known me before that would be shocked to know that that's where I ended up. And so I didn't know how to do this Christian relationship thing. Like I like her, she's attractive, it's cool, but like I don't know how to do this thing in the Christian setting, right?
Yeah.
And so I heard this, right? Because my friend Jerry comes back and he shares the story. I'm like, okay, well maybe that's how you do it. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do. So I was trying to figure out how to ask it without being obvious, because I thought maybe that's kind of like a proposal, and I don't know if I want to propose yet. And so I asked her what her vision was. I got onto it. She laid out was just exactly what I was feeling. And I thought, okay, if you're going to spend your life with someone, that's as good a reason as I know. And so pretty soon after that, we got back together. I asked her this after I got back from El Salvador. And I asked her to marry me pretty quickly after that. And like Jane said, though, we postponed it so that we could work with the kids through the summer, but got married like on Labor Day. Like as soon as summer was over, okay, we're married. Let's do this thing.
I guess that's a better option than getting married before, and then your honeymoon is in Mexico with 16 teenagers.
Well, especially so because you've done this plenty of times. You know what working with kids is. You know how little time you have alone.
Oh yeah.
Literally, our date was we drove coach buses that had like Greyhound buses that had bathrooms on them down there. Was the only time we could get alone is I would take her with me to go dump the toilet on the bus. That was our date during working with the kids. That was the only time we had alone, is to drive off to the pump station to dump the waste out of the bus.
That might be the only thing that could be more romantic than Macbeth.
I know. You work with what you have.
Yeah.
Work with what we had.
It's so true. Oh, I love it. So take us through, because here, Jane, you said it early on that you learn to hold things loosely, right? That's kind of part of life, even what you think or things that you hope for, even things that you're like, God, I really believe that this is what you've given me, but I hold it loosely. And I just look at all of your life and the things that I know about your family, and even the small details from when one of the things that really stood out to me when I met you, and I can't remember whether it was John or Jane I had this conversation, but you were sharing about how when your kids were a certain age, you would bring them to the airport.
Good.
And basically, like, they needed to figure out how to travel. Like, without you, though, they got to find their plane, they got to get on it. And they would get to travel to all these places. Again, obviously, kids and missionaries. But it was the first time I'd ever heard anyone like intentionally being like, okay, you're here, now figure it out. And something about that actually uprooted for me even a little bit more of what I had in my brain as like parenting, my job to protect and always kind of be by their side, and what it looked like to actually give your kids the skills beyond when they're under your roof. I'm going to let you guys decide which one wants to talk this through, but you guys have been pretty intentional as far as giving them experiences, traveling, all of these things. Was this like a decided parenting, like, hey, this is what we want to do? Was it just kind of...
Without a doubt. Because we've taken our kids with us on the majority of the travels that we've done as missionaries.
Starting as infants.
you have to make a conscientious decision of what's safe. You have to ask the question, what's safe and what's worth it? We could spend all our time on the trip trying to protect our kids, or we could teach them a lot of ways how to discern and protect themselves within the context with that. But so much of that comes from experience. It's not information you can just download. It's not necessarily something, especially a young child, can read in a book. And so we were very intentional of, when we would go to a different town, of putting our kids into play groups with kids from different cultures, even though they couldn't speak the language, letting them stay with other families who had kids without us to learn the process with that. But in specific to the thing with flying, what we would find is when they got to be about 10 or 11 years old, we would have them lead us through the airport and even follow them down the wrong way if they were going. And eventually, we would say, no.
When's the last time you read that sign? Because it says the other way.
We're going to miss our flights, kids. Come on.
No, we would literally be trooping behind them, knowing that we're going down the wrong way and letting that happen. So number one, they learned they were responsible for all of us, but it taught them to navigate.
And then when they got to 12 or 13, if we knew we were all flying back, we would book that child on a separate flight. Same itinerary, same destination, but we would be flying at different times, and we wouldn't be in the airport at the same time, arriving at different places with that. And we had one daughter fell asleep at the gate and missed her flight.
Oh. Yep. And we were in a different state. We weren't even anywhere near in a position to help.
And again, this is before cell phones.
Yep.
So she had to get on a payphone crying, and we reminded her of what she knew. And she was able to navigate through it and get home with that. And the other thing, which I don't know if you know also, is that when they turned around 18, we have made them road trip.
Yes.
Various places on themselves driving.
Together. There's usually a pair.
But they would take trips from here, either down to see my family in Texas or even out to California, different places. But we would help them, know how to read a map, know how to keep the car running, and say, it's time for your adventure. You need to go.
Some of that's about learning to read a map, and I actually believe that's really important. But the other part is having those experiences of, I can do it. And they have I can do it experiences. And albeit our kids were all in sports, soccer, volleyball, swimming, running. Oh my God, we got so many I can do it sport experiences. That's not the same as I've just navigated myself through this experience. I can do it. They are different. Both will build your self-esteem. But to this day, my kids know that they can get someplace or figure out how to get someplace or ask on how to get someplace. So just put it all together. I think that's foundational. I really do.
Oh, absolutely. We're big fans of teaching kids to self-advocate. It's important for them to be able to speak up and express their needs, or also know when to ask for help.
Well,
and unfortunately, I feel like kids are losing that more and more. And talk about, the irony is, I feel like that creates more danger for kids than putting them in situations and teaching them how to work it out, how to figure it out. So,
and make mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
At that time, my greatest fear was that one of my kids would miss that plane. And if anybody was going to do it, it was going to be Hannah. And she did. But I learned along the way, too. I do. There's a certain piece of me that had to release it.
Yeah.
And so it's dual. And my side was probably harder than hers, honestly.
I believe it. John, you mentioned asking the question, what is safe? And this was the question that you kind of posed before my students and again with our church in regards to really kind of a more difficult part of your story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So here's the switch in the story, right? Is you could end the podcast right now and it's like, oh, tip number 427 for raising responsible kids and having them be great and everything work out great. And it doesn't always work out great. So we actually have 4 daughters, and we've taken them into the former Soviet Union when we were working there. We've taken them into barrios in Mexico building houses. We've taken them into the forest of Honduras. We ask ourselves, okay, but what if something happens? What if one of them gets sick? What if we're caught in a drive-by shooting? What if we're in a wreck? 9 years ago, on this upcoming October 3rd, our youngest daughter, Olivia, was killed a mile from our house on a sunny Saturday morning while getting ready to do a 1-mile fun run, surrounded by people that we love and that we trust. And of all the environments that we've taken our kids or encouraged our kids to go into, there's probably not one that was more safe than that. There's probably not one that was more controlled than that. An impaired college student rushing back to class blew through a crosswalk and killed her in front of one of her sisters and in front of a crowd of people. So that question of what is safe for us takes on a very different meaning, because that was about the safest environment we could have our kids in.
Absolutely. Jane, you mentioned just a few moments ago that, as a mom, it being harder on you and this releasing and letting your girls be out there. I think it could easily go both ways when you walk through something like that. There could be the lesson of, okay, well, this kind of affirms the fact that there's really no safe, controlled, even the safest environment, like things can happen. Or the other side is there can become this like, okay, I gotta cling to whatever I have left because now I've walked through loss. As a mom, how did you walk through this, obviously a huge loss, and still be able to continue with your 3 other daughters and continue to have the same kind of faith that prior to that you all exuded in everything, your parenting, the decisions you were making?
There's a very real temptation to do what you just said. And you used your hands when you said this, and you kind of like brought them together in front of you. And that temptation is to, in a way, it's living in the fear that something bad is always still going to happen, and that I can prevent that by somehow controlling it. No, so that's the temptation. I'm just kind of restating what you just said anyway. I realized then it becomes all about me. And the reality is, it's not all about me. I have these incredible daughters, and I have this incredible husband who I still want to see have individual, lovely, explorative walks with God. In order for me to see that, I have to, and sometimes it's scary, but I have to release that. And I have to be able to say, I still believe God has this. If I didn't do that, it's like never walking out the front door, honestly. And I've looked at some of the things my daughters are doing, and I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and all I know to do is pray because I'm scared. Whether or not that's real, whether or not it's the Holy Spirit, I don't know. All I know is that when I pray, I release it, to God again. There's no perfect answer to this. I will live with my greatest fear happening for the rest of my life. And that was having one of my children die. Greatest fear, bar none. And you think that once you've reached that greatest fear, well, then but no, the residuals of it change you. And they can change you in ways that, unless you experience it, you would never know. And so part of that was this little seed of fear, which I cognitively say, God, I don't want to live with that. I'm still going to trust you. And I will tell the world this. I divorced God. We actually went to Norway because my oldest daughter had been living there, and we didn't want her to have any kind of holiday alone without us. So Olivia's accident was in October. It's December, and we're in Norway with Hope. And we're still very raw at this point. And I remember waking up one morning in this little cabin that someone let us stay in, and it's sparkly, shiny, snowy outside. It was idyllic, actually. And I just said, God, you coulda, shoulda, coulda, woulda, and you didn't. And I said, I'm done. I'm divorcing you. I wrote up papers, and I'm standing in front of God, and I'm saying, I want nothing, because you have hurt me. And I never believed it was intentional, but that hurt was so real. And I'm standing there, and I have these papers in my hand, and I'm saying, I don't want anything else. And the thing is, it takes two people in a divorce. It kind of does. That's what I realized. And God looked at me, and he said, I will never leave you. And I realized at that point, that's what I was going to live with. That God said he will never leave me. He will never leave my loves. He will never leave my life. He will never leave my visions. And he was always there during all of it. So I'm not divorced. And at that point, God wrapped his arms around me, and I walked out of the room, and I sat next to my kids. I know.
Try and collect myself so they can't hear me ugly cry through the microphone. John, if you could speak to just walking through that in marriage too. I think we hear a lot, I hate the word statistically, but you just hear a lot about what the loss of a child can do to a marriage. And here you are, you both are sitting here in front of me, and together, what was that journey for you?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is, if anybody's listening and they've been through this and they are divorced, man, I get it. I get it. Some days it feels like that would have been the right thing to do, the most compassionate thing to do for myself, for Jane, just because proximity in some ways brought comfort, but honestly, early on, proximity only intensified the pain because you saw that pain reflected in someone that you loved, and you saw it intensified in someone that you loved. Looking back 9 years later, if we did anything that was helpful in that, I think it was really to give each other space. It was really to support each other's individual way of handling grief. And that's sacrificial. That's very sacrificial, because I like to be close. I need interaction. I lean more towards the extrovert. I learn what I'm thinking while I'm saying it. Jane's much more introverted. She's much more reserved. She's much more needs space. She needs time. So for me to give her that space hurt. It hurt me. For her to be with me hurt her. So we were both suffering through, but we were also both giving each other space. And honestly, we both supported each other's the thing that you do, because you got to have a thing. You got to, whether it's you go for runs or you journal or you go for bike rides or you take up something, you cook or you redecorate the house, whatever it is. I mean, there's got to be some tangible way to work the energy of that grief out. And Jane really, that's when she really ramped up her photography, which I think is a perfect thing for someone who is more introverted, because it gives a barrier. The camera becomes something you're behind, so you can engage, but you've got room with that. So she took that up. I actually went to seminary, which is very different, which demanded a lot of interaction with people, a lot of productivity and thought. And I tell some people, seminary saved my life. It told me what to think. It said, think about this, produce this, be with these people, do these things. And I needed that because I couldn't create any of that on my own. So we gave each other space, and we supported each other's kind of outlet in that. And then there's just a ton of grace. I mean, just a ton of grace through the whole thing. I don't want that to come off sounding formulaic. I don't want that to come off saying that's what did it, because I'm pretty sure it's not. It may have helped. I love Jane more than I've ever loved her. I love her more than I've ever loved anybody else, and I can't imagine my life without her. And a lot of that is not in spite of the tragedy, but a lot of that is because of it, because of what we've been through.
John said something. I remember we were taking a walk on a path, and I've never forgotten this. I actually remember where we were standing when John said this. And he said, I don't want to be part of this club. And I don't either. Neither of us do.
Yeah.
I'm just glad we were holding hands when he said it, because we are together.
I like that you said this isn't a formula. And I think about that often, that for whatever reason in our human nature, we would love for everything to have a formula. Just give me everything 1 + 1 = 2. And the further you get in life, regardless of your journey, the more it just debunks that whole idea.
Right? Yeah.
And everybody, I think that's the beauty in hearing so many different stories, is the affirmation that even though there's no formula to things, that there's foundation in Christ. And Jane, your description of divorce takes 2 parties, and, you can divorce God, but God's like, sorry, I'm not signing the papers, is just such a beautiful picture of that there's this foundation that we walk, and it looks different for different people. And sometimes that road, like you said, John, some people have walked through divorce. That's been part of the journey of loss and different things. And none of those things does God stop meeting us. Like, there's not something that comes into the mix that God's like, oh, sorry, there's too many ingredients to this now, like too many components, I'm out. And it's a beautiful part of grace. But
and like Jane said, nobody wants to be part of this club. And an unfortunate right of membership is that inevitably somebody else is going to lose a child. And you're going to have mutual friends. And so they're going to come knocking on your door saying, hey, what do we do? Hey, how do we handle this? Hey, what do we tell these people? Because all of a sudden we're supposed to be the experts on it. And there is no answer.
Nope.
There is no, we can share with you a few things not to do, but there is no formula for this. There is no thing that you're just going to do to make it all better.
Nope.
It doesn't exist.
It's so true. Actually, I would love to know. I'm just thinking of people who are in that position right now, and maybe even that they're like, oh no, so there's no right thing to do. But maybe it would be helpful for them to hear just give me like maybe 2 or 3. Here's what not to do. At least let's take these things off your list.
Oh, Bethany.
We've had so many, I would use the word weird. What's the right word? People are trying to help. Oh my God, I love these people. But sometimes the stuff that comes out of their mouth, don't say it. If you can't think of something to say, don't. Just be there. Silence is amazing. I remember I would wake up and my friend would just be sitting next to me and she never said anything. And I remember I'd fall asleep and I'd wake up and she'd still be there. Silence and just being next to somebody goes a lot farther than words. Don't say something if you don't know what to say.
And I will say this in a generality. Do not try to make sense out of it.
No.
So many people, and I understand this, but so many people would think that, hey, if I can give an explanation for this, then it will be, if not okay, it'll be less bad. Listen, nothing makes sense. There is no sense making in that time. And by trying to force an explanation, whether that's dressed up with Bible verses or cultural cliches or whatever it is, don't do it. And then the other thing is, well, even in our situation where we have lost a child, I never say to another person, I know what you're feeling.
Nope.
Because I don't. And I have no way to imagine the individual experience of their loss. Now, I know loss and I know trauma, but I don't know their trauma and I don't know their loss. And so when someone tries to, in a way, and again, on my best moments, I believe it's a good motivation that the person's trying to do this, but you don't know what I'm feeling, because I don't know what I'm feeling. I literally, all I experience right now is pain. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to handle it. So how can you know what it is with that?
It's almost like if we stopped trying to make things better and worked harder at giving people permission for it not to be better.
Absolutely.
For it to be bad.
Yes.
Just, and as you said, Jane, like quiet space for it just to suck. Like just let it suck and let it be. We don't have to find the silver lining in things and, hurt. Sometimes we can't rush people through that, through hurt. Like there is no light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, as people like to say, like, let's rush towards that. It's just letting people be where they're at.
And I have to give a huge shout out also to our church and our community here in Fayetteville and in Northwest Arkansas. Listen, we won't have to look far to find stories of churches that have blown it, that have done bad things and have messed up. But our church here and our community of friends and supporters, they suffered with us. They really took our suffering into their own, and they didn't force us to be better. They didn't force us to come out as some kind of shining testimony of how you're supposed to behave as a Christian when tragedy strikes. They let us grieve, they let us question, they let us wail, and then when we found something productive together, which is Olivia's basket, going down to Mexico and building houses, they came with us and walked with us through the whole thing. And there's no way we would be together or even sane, maybe even alive, without that community support. So even though we talked about things you don't say and things that you do, the vast majority of our experience with other people has been, they believed for us when we couldn't believe. They fed us when we couldn't feed ourselves, carried us when we couldn't walk. I mean,
Made our beds.
Yeah, I mean, just we're phenomenal.
That's amazing. So you totally gave me the hook for bringing it to this is where we come together is Olivia's basket. I'm going to go to Jane on this one. Jane.
It's her deal.
Tell me about Olivia's basket.
Obviously, we've expressed that we've traveled the world with our children, and we'd been to Mexico many times. Even Olivia, at 8 years old, had been on a build site at some point when we were in Mexico. So after Olivia's accident, we were surrounded by people who, and this is a really humbling thing, who just wanted to help. And this is where John had just this inspiration to be able to funnel any kinds of gifts towards building a home. Our family in Ensenada, Mexico, just opened their doors. Not unexpectedly, but it happened. So in February, our family traveled to Tijuana, Mexico, and with people who joined us, we built a very first home in honor of Olivia. We then built another house in March with still those gifts that people had given, and that one was in Honduras. That summer, we went back to Mexico and built 2 more homes. I look back at that and go, what were we thinking? But I believe it was the grace of God that was kind of propelling us and keeping us moving. Mm-hmm. I absolutely believe that we needed that. We'd always been moving, but this was just a type of regularity for our family. But we don't build these houses alone. It takes an amazing group of people. And to have these people come along, some which we would invite or just present the thing, was extraordinary. This summer we built our 19th home. Wow. Which I never could have imagined. Honestly, I genuinely couldn't. I remember at number 3. Okay, ready? And I'm sitting on the roof with John, and I don't go on the roof very often, so that was kind of special. And we'd just taken a big picture. You know, I love those end of build pictures because you're just, and I have a bunch of them now. And he looked at me and he said, "This is the last one, isn't it?" And I looked at him and I said, "I don't think so." And it wasn't prophetic. It was just my gut saying, "I don't think so." When John says this is my deal, that's an understatement on his part. None of this happens. None of this happens without John making my way. He does. He paves a road, and it allows me to look at a stranger in a store and say, "You know what? Join us on a house build. These are the dates," and he knows. He knows that I'll do that. So there are 2 things that happen here. One, an incredible house is built for a family, sometimes in desperate need. I mean, we built a home for a grandmother taking care of her granddaughter, and when we arrived at that build site, all we saw was a pile of ash because her house had burnt to the ground. And at the end of 2 days, she had a beautiful house, fully furnished on the inside, that had a lock on its door, windows that closed, and a roof that didn't leak. So that's an obvious thing that happens, is this extraordinary change of lives that will affect them for generations, because that's what happens. Generations are changed by investing 2 days of your life, not even 2 full days, in building a home. And the other thing that I have to express is the lives that are changed by the people who come and build. I had a friend of mine who I'd known for years. After the end of the first build that she'd ever done, she came to my room and she was heaving and sobbing in tears. I'd never seen her like this, and I said, "What?" And she said, "I had no idea." She could barely talk. And I said, I didn't even say anything. I didn't know what to say. And she said, "I had no idea this is what you do." They went home, inspired, raised money to build an entirely another house the next year for another family. that replication process, because of the experience you have of investing yourself, that is what stays forever. And I have no problem saying, come with us. You will build a house that will change a family for generations, but you're going to be changed and challenged for the rest of your life because of it. It's true.
And I can say that it's absolutely true.
I know.
Because
Right there.
building, and as you're talking, I was like, that's it, I'm going back.
Your head, you were nodding the entire time. I know, it's true.
Gosh. This has just been incredible, hearing your story and just seeing your faces again. I miss you guys a lot. So here's how we're wrapping up. I've changed a few things in season 3. I have kind of a rapid fire round of questions for you. And since there's 2 of you, this is how it's going to go. All you get to decide is who goes first. But
John.
Then it's ping pong. So John is first.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. John, would you rather text or make a phone call?
Make a phone call.
Love it. Jane, do you prefer Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Between those 2, I'm going to do a Starbucks. Thank you.
Girl. John, it's a long, long road trip. Are you going to drive or would you prefer to ride?
Oh, I have to drive.
That's true. You're a good driver.
Jane, what was the last movie that you actually paid money to either rent or go watch?
Oh, I'm terrible at this. It was the other night. Didn't we rent something? Not Isle of Dogs. What was it? Oh, geez.
Well, we went to see Black Klansman together.
Yeah, we did.
That's the last one I think we did. We paid money to go see.
Thank you.
Together.
Yeah, so that was mine. He gets another one. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so John, name or give me the name of your favorite musician of all time.
Oh, my gosh.
Jerry Jeff Walker.
Ooh.
Johnny Cash? Oh, that's a big answer for him. Jeez.
I'm not providing marriage counseling after this, so let's just all go on. Jane, let me know, who is your celebrity crush?
Oh.
John, plug your ears.
No, who's the guy I like so much in Roman Holiday?
Cary Grant?
No, much better. The Things of Kilimanjaro.
Oh, Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck. It's Gregory Peck. 100 million times it's Gregory Peck. He's so handsome. But I married John, so it's all good. Thank you for knowing that. Notice how you have to ask John for the specifics.
That was
what I'm
actually my
thinking.
favorite. John, who do I crush on? Remind me. Oh.
I mean, I know.
So John, I love that you got this question. What is the last book that you read and loved?
Wow.
Crazy Holy Grace by Frederick Buechner ripped me apart. Just ripped me apart.
All right. Final question. This one's to you, Miss Jane.
Okay, John's going to help me, right?
You know what? It's not even a hard one, so both of you can answer. You guys, it's date night. You're watching a movie. You get to pick your favorite junk food to eat while you watch it. What do you choose?
Oh, junk food. Oh, do we do junk food?
Let's say movie food. What are you going to eat while you watch
I
the
don't
movie?
know. Homemade nachos and cheese are good. John does them really well. Just stick them in the oven, lots of cheese, maybe some green chilies on there, maybe some ground meat, but not so much. I don't know. That's really good.
Chicago deep dish pizza. Spicy, Italian, Chicago, like a foot thick, like the slice is taller than it is wide, with a whole wheat crust and lots of peppers.
Tabasco?
Oh my God. And you can't move. Like you have to roll out of your chair afterwards, kind of slither across the floor to bed because you're so full. Yeah, that's it.
Wow, I should have said grapefruit or something like to balance that.
I am definitely doing movie nights at your
What
house
is
from here
yours?
on out.
Okay, we get to ask, what would your answer to that question be?
Oh, goodness. Okay, so I have two favorites, and I've actually done them both during movies. I am totally a chips and salsa kind of gal, and I love it with cheese. We do like a cowboy salsa. That's my fave. And then I also love like the cheese, salami, like that kind of plate, the fancy cheeses.
Oh, yes, yes.
I could sit and snack on that all day long. So, all right, you guys, you did amazing. Do you do podcasts all the time? Be honest.
Only yours.
Only.
Yeah.
This is the first one we've ever done as a couple.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. That's it. I get to put exclusive when
That's it.
Well, thank you so much for being guests on today's show. I know this is going to mean a lot to our listeners. Okay, so if you happen to be driving to work or you need to go and be in the presence of people in general, you're probably going to need a few minutes to compose yourself. If it was anything like me and my mascara is smeared and I'm wiping my nose because I just love these people so much. I am telling you, sitting and listening to them share their story, I have heard their story before. It is just every single time so powerful and moving. Their vulnerability, just their honesty about the journey that they've been on. These are people that I admire on probably every level, from their marriage to their parenting to their ministries. I mean, seriously, John and Jane Ray, can I be you when I grow up? Or probably, if I ever really grow up. I was so just encouraged. And also as a parent, I kind of needed the reminder again today that my part in the whole process of teaching my kids, that it's not about always being their discernment and protecting them. But I love what John said about teaching them to discern and protect themselves, like putting them in situations, allowing them to be in places where they've got to figure it out. I just thought, man, he could write an entire parenting book in regards to that. Because I know for me, that freaks me out. The idea, as they're telling the story about Hannah falling asleep and missing her plane, my heart was racing. I had sweaty armpits. I was just so nervous. And it's not even my kid, but just thinking about, oh my word, like what if that was my kid? And it just honestly was a revealing moment of, I got a lot of work to do in this, like a lot of work. And then their beautiful honesty about marriage and walking through hard things and giving each other space, even when that's painful. I don't think I've ever heard anyone describe so clearly walking that kind of lost journey as a married couple and just being so honest about, you know what, really the best gift you can give is space. And I know for me, like I wrote a lot of notes down in that area as they were talking about just safety and our desire to really, think that we have control of things and keep environments where we feel like, it's really like a false sense of security, right? But just remembering through their story, through their testimony, that ultimately we can live our lives in this false sense of security, trying to hold on to control, or as the Rays have really exemplified in their entire lives, is just surrendering to God, really, like Jane said, holding loosely to things and just trusting God, that you're in this and all of it, in the good, in the hard, God, that you're gonna walk with us no matter what. And we don't have to control things, and we don't have to, spend our days trying to find the safest possible option, but God, that we can follow you with absolute abandon and with courage and with faith. And I am telling you the story when Jane shared about divorcing God, and she described just writing up those papers and standing before God, that her line from basically divorce takes two people, and that even though she was divorcing God, that God would not divorce her. That was definitely a mic drop moment. And honestly, that's kind of where I want to leave it today, just for all of us to remember, because I don't know where each of you are at. There's far too many listeners at this point for me to really gauge different seasons of life or things you've walked through or things you are walking through. But I just hope that this story really encouraged you and that you remember, maybe even in seasons where you just feel like you're divorcing God, you're walking away, you're God, I'm done with you, that God isn't done with you, that He's in it. He's in it. He's with you. He is faithful. And I just hope that for whoever needs to hear that today, that you hear it loud and clear and know that no matter how far you think that you've run and shut God out, that He's never run from you and He hasn't shut you out. His arms are wide open and He loves you and is faithful to walk with you in whatever it is that you're walking through. Listeners, I love that you took this week to listen. I love that I get to introduce you to John and Jane. Absolutely. Get in touch with them. Find out about Olivia's basket. You know, if you're someone that's like, I would love to donate to that, go to their website. You can check all those things in our show notes. And whether you donate, whether you go on a trip, this is definitely people that you would not regret getting involved with and supporting as they continue to walk this incredible journey with their Savior. I hope you guys have an incredible week. And as always, I am praying that wherever God has you, that you'll continue to run your race in your place. Thanks for listening.